name's Mark McCormick, and right about now, Malcolm is worrying that I'm going to say something that's going to embarrass him or my family. So I'm going to try to avoid that and keep it as short as possible and within the rails. He never worked within the rails. And I'm speaking for my wife, Karen Myers, and my son, Miller McCormick, and Malcolm's grandmother, Marcia Wise, who was here last year. I'm never going to do the job she did. She was great last year. And thank you for being here to honor and celebrate Mac's life. Thanks to those who signed a petition to rename the park and those who helped afterwards. Thanks to Councilman Corey O'Connor for renaming it Blue Slide Park, and I'm going to need his support because my son and I are working on the design of some kind of a thing to identify this, and there's no way we can do something that conforms with the rest of the park because that just wouldn't be true to Malcolm. Corey O'Connor, the councilman, happened to be Malcolm's coach when he played baseball right across the way of that baseball park. And Malcolm he was little when he was young. He was fearless, he was competitive, he was ambitious, and he cared about everybody. He cared about everybody.
That's what he loved about it.
He was a proud Pittsburgh who loved the city of Pittsburgh, the sports teams, especially his beloved Steelers. And he remained loyal to his friends that helped him on his way. He was always loving and kind to others. And I said, fearless, competitive, ambitious, and most importantly, he was a fucking hard worker. I want to mention some names some of you may recognize, and some of you may not, but I want to recognize them. Malcolm started out rapping when he was 14. He started playing the piano when he was 6, and he really started rapping when he was 6. There's one other thing I forgot to mention. When he was 3 years old, my wife, who's a photographer, took a picture of him with a thermometer in his mouth for UPMC. And that picture appeared on a huge billboard all around the city, including a billboard as you came into the city of Pittsburgh. And when he saw that, I mean, he knew and we knew that there was going to be something special there. So the people I want to mention is, and the people that he started working with when he was 14, really, is Q, Quentin Cuff, who's a Pittsburgher. Jimmy Merton, who's a Pittsburgher. Tree J, who's a Pittsburgher. I might add that Tree J was the guy, and Quentin and everybody, that put together these videos made in the backyard or whatever, and got his music online. So without 3J, I'm not sure where he'd be, but this combination of help from others and a fair amount of luck, and he decided that that's what he was going to do when he was 15, period. I would take him out on the porch and say, Malcolm, you got to have a plan B. And he'd kind of look at me and say, no, and they didn't want to. And of course, to do what he did, you cannot have a plan B. You got to have whatever you love. You have to go after it with everything you have. And I learned a lot from him, and I think we all did. Also, I wanted to mention Dylan Reynolds, whose music career is I guess, looking pretty good. And Bill Niels, who goes by Waves. And Bill, he was in a lot of trouble for a long time. But he got clean, became a new man, and is doing really, really well. And we I think if you haven't heard them, you ought to check them out. There's also people in the music business here in Pittsburgh. Dan of ID Labs, we were in that
Legend.
Germ was also formerly Ian Wilson, who did all of his videos. And I have to say Benji Gridberg, who was his first manager on his first label. And then there are the folks in LA in the music business. There's Chris Kelly and Clancy of Four Strikes, and Preston Hui, who really worked with Malcolm most closely. Mike Petrecka, who's from, I think, not in Pittsburgh, but just
right outside of Pittsburgh.
That's right outside of Pittsburgh. Did his lighting. Elise Ledovich, who was his first tour manager, and I mean, he had amazing people that helped him. And the people he loved the most, I think, were the musicians that he worked with.
Yes.
Like Vince Staples, Thundercat, Anderson .Paak, SZA, Tyler the Creator, Hannah and Christian of Group Love. And if you haven't heard of Group Love, check them out. Group Love. They became the closest of friends. And then Future, Earl Sweatshirt, and finally Kendrick Lamar, and I'm sure there are others that I haven't mentioned I forgot about.
Schoolboy Q.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Schoolboy Q. We were something, and we became friends with all of these people, and some of them we remain friends with to this day. And it's wonderful to have those people in our lives.
French Montana.
French Montana.
French Montana.
Frank Montana?
French Montana. Yeah.
French Montana. Well,
I think
French Montana was a fucking asshole. Sorry to say. No offense. He's the guy that came out and said, after Malcolm died, if he would have just listened to me.
The internet.
The internet.
Patrick Page.
Patrick Page, Sid,
Steve
Lacey, all of them. And when we were in LA, they had this thing the night after when all these folks, Chevy Woods, Casey Veggies, absolutely.
Come up, boys.
Yeah, franchise.
Oh, the Come Up Boys.
Fran and Ben.
Fran and Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me with that. But we were out there. They had this thing the night after he died, and at the studio, his favorite studio, and a ton of people showed up that he worked with. So I got to hang out with Earl Sweatshirt and Vince Staples, going at each other, trying to beat the other one and make a funnier joke. And I'll tell you, Malcolm had a killer sense of humor. He could have been a comedian, I think. He could have been a lot of things, but he wanted to be a musician. So there were also the features and the producers, particularly John Ian, who produced the last album, who was a genius. CeeLo Green, John Mayer. And he was honored. He was honored. And those people agreed that he was honored. So, when he was 14, he didn't want to go to school. And part of the reason he didn't want to go to school, he was up all night the night before working on his music. So there were endless difficulty in the morning with his mom and him trying to get him to school. Thank God he graduated from high school, but without her help, it never would have happened. One other story about Malcolm, and I don't know if you may have heard about this, but he was in a restaurant, and he'd go to some really nice restaurants, and he'd usually invite a lot of friends. There usually be 10 people there. He ordered way more food than anybody could eat, and they were nice restaurants. And this one night, there was a waiter that was working there. There was a new waiter, I think. And he was late with the food and forgot to do this and this and this instead of being a typical white old asshole. Malcolm talked to him gently about how he could become a better waiter. And that's the way he was. He would try to help anybody that could.
He's a great kid.
He is a great kid.
Inspired tons, apparently.
So anything, if I would summarize, I think the way Malcolm looked at life, he valued relationships. He was ambitious and competitive, a hard worker. He appreciated his family, and he really enjoyed performing, but only under certain circumstances. He performed at CMU, at one of those CMU fests.
Central Michigan Mount Pleasant.
And what he saw was a lot of college kids that were standing around drinking and talking with each other, and they weren't really listening to him. And when he came off of that stage, he was pissed. He didn't go back to do, whatever they call it.
Tour stop, yeah.
No, not a tour stop. He didn't come back to do Encore.
Oh, there you go.
Any more colleges?
Well, he performed at a lot of colleges, and they were good because the money was good. And some of the colleges were great, but a lot of the colleges, here again, and I was at some of these college concerts, people were but they didn't engage. And what Malcolm wanted was to engage with people. He liked smaller venues because he could see the people he was performing to, and he engaged them. And he was able to take a lot of people, put them in the palm of his hand, and so when people listened to him, he'd come off that stage and he'd be exhausted, but he would be joyful. Woo! Joyful for the support that he got from his fans. So he wasn't perfect. None of us are. But he lived a hell of a life in the 26 years he was with us. And I know me, Karen, and Miller, and Marcia just are so appreciative of the years that we had with him.
So are we.
He made our lives so different. I'm going to end with something you're probably not going to want to hear. So they finally caught the motherfucker that sold him the drugs. And we find some comfort in that.
That's right.
And many of us were young, including me, experimenting with drugs. But it's a different fucking world out there. And all it takes is a little stone, a little tiny stone of fentanyl and cocaine, and you're dead. Drugs are being laced with fentanyl, all kinds of drugs. And the one thing I would say to you is, don't take the risk. It's just not worth it.
Amen.
It's just not worth it. So thank you very much.
Love you. Thank you for coming.
How about a big round of applause?